The air was thick with the scent of fresh rain as I walked into the house. The door creaked shut behind me, and I immediately felt the shift in the atmosphere. The subtle weight that lingered when my father was home. He had been away on business for the past few days, and I had gotten used to the silence. The emptiness that his absence created. But now that he was back, it was as if everything was just a little too quiet. I could hear his voice from the kitchen, low and comforting, the way he always spoke to Ivy. My stepmother. They were talking about something mundane, probably his trip. Maybe dinner, but it didn't matter. I could hear Ivy's laugh, the soft, melodic sound that had always been there. Like an unspoken mark of their bond. And then there was the way he responded, the familiar warmth in his tone. The way he made her laugh with a comment I couldn't hear. It all made me feel like an outsider in my own home. I had spent the last few years watching their relationship from a distance. Trying to ignore the little things that bothered me. Trying to convince myself that it was all fine. But it wasn't. It had never been fine. Something about the way they looked at each other made me feel invisible. Like I was just an accessory to their perfect little world. And now, there was a new thing that was gnawing at me, something I couldn't ignore, her hair. Ivy's hair always smelled the same. That subtle floral scent, like the soap my father used in the bathroom. The one I always thought was a little too strong, a little too sweet. But now, when I walked into the kitchen that evening, I realized that her hair carried the exact same scent. It made my stomach turn. It wasn't just the smell. It was the way it made me feel, like I wasn't the person my father had once known. I could see the way he looked at Ivy. The way he would touch her shoulder casually when he thought no one was looking. The way their laughs would blend together, creating this perfect harmony that I could never be a part of. But the smell that was the same as his soap, was the final straw. It wasn't just that they shared a bond I couldn't touch. It was that everything about her was now tied to him, to his presence. To the life he had built with her. I stood there in the doorway for a moment, too afraid to move. I wanted to confront them both. I wanted to scream that I could see through their perfect little world. But I couldn't. The words were lodged in my throat, and all I could do was stand there, invisible. As the smell of her hair and the sound of their laughter filled the air. Finally, Ivy turned, her eyes meeting mine, and that was when I realized that she knew. She knew how I felt. She had always known. It was in the way her smile would fade when she caught my eye, in the way her gaze would shift. Like she was afraid I might expose the truth she was so desperately trying to hide. But she didn't need to worry. I wasn't going to say anything. "Welcome home," she said softly, her voice dripping with sweetness, as if nothing was wrong. But I could hear the lie in it. I nodded, offering a tight smile, trying my best to hide the anger and frustration I felt. Ivy didn't deserve to know how much she had hurt me. How much I resented the way she had inserted herself into my father's life. But it didn't matter. She was already there. She had been there for years, and now, I was just a ghost in the background of their life. As I walked past them, the smell of her hair clung to the air, mixing with the lingering scent of my father's soap. It was all too much. I wanted to leave, to escape to somewhere where the memories of their perfect little world wouldn't follow me, but I couldn't. I was stuck in this house, with them, and the reality of it all was slowly suffocating me. And as I headed upstairs to my room, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living in this lie. But for now, all I could do was breathe in the air, trying to ignore the smell of her hair. The same smell that I once thought belonged to my father alone. Maybe one day, I'd find the courage to confront them. Maybe one day, I'd make them see me. But for now, I was just a ghost, drifting in the background of a life I no longer recognized. The house felt different when my father came back. It always did. The air seemed to shift, like the quiet of his absence had finally found its place. Only to be interrupted by his return. But this time, it wasn't just him coming back from a business trip. It was the way everything felt, changed. He was back, but so was Ivy, and now it wasn't just the silence that was oppressive. It was the way things had shifted between us. I walked into the living room, hoping to avoid them. I didn't want to hear their laughter. Their inside jokes that had long ago been excluded from my life. But when I walked by, I caught a whiff of something familiar. Something that seemed to pull me into their world again, despite my best efforts to stay away. Ivy's hair. The same scent. The same soap that my father used. It's not like I hadn't noticed before, but tonight, it was all too much. It hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just the fact that her hair smelled like him. It was that the smell seemed to have permeated everything around her. The way she leaned in when he spoke, the way she looked at him with that softness in her eyes. Like she was the only one who had his attention, like she was the one who had his love. And it sickened me. I couldn't help but remember the first time I had noticed it. I was just a kid, not even old enough to fully grasp the complexities of relationships. But I'd known then. I'd known that when Ivy laughed or touched my father's arm, she was doing something I couldn't. She was creating this bond, this closeness that I could never have. And the smell of her hair, so much like my father's soap, was a constant reminder of it. My father's presence always made everything feel calmer, safer. But now, it only felt like a facade. Every time he smiled at Ivy, every time their eyes locked, I could feel the invisible wall that had been built between us. I wasn't part of their world anymore. I wasn't part of his world. I was the outsider. The third wheel. I wanted to walk away, but something kept me rooted to the spot. I stood there, listening to their voices float up from the kitchen. Hearing their low murmurs and quiet laughter. I could feel the weight of the words unsaid, the resentment I had been burying for so long. I could feel it all crashing down around me, threatening to spill out. When I finally walked into the kitchen, Ivy was standing at the counter. Her back to me as she stirred something in a pot. My father was sitting at the table, reading through some papers. The quiet that had settled over the room felt suffocating. I didn't know what I wanted to say. I didn't even know what I was angry about anymore. But I couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. I took a deep breath and crossed my arms. I can't keep pretending, I said quietly, my voice breaking the silence. Ivy turned slowly, that same practiced smile on her lips. Pretending about what? She asked, her voice too sweet, too careful. I could feel my anger building. I could feel the words I had been holding back for so long spilling over. Pretending that everything is fine. Pretending that I'm okay with the way things are between us. You and Dad, you've built something without me. And I'm just supposed to accept it. There it was, out in the open. The thing I had tried so hard to ignore for so long. The thing I had buried deep inside, telling myself that it didn't matter. That I could make it work. But I couldn't. I wasn't a child anymore, and I couldn't keep living in a house where the walls were built around someone else's love. Ivy's smile faded, her eyes narrowing just a little. You know that's not true, she said, her voice laced with something cold. Something that didn't match the warmth she had shown earlier. I never meant for you to feel left out. I laughed bitterly, not wanting to hear her excuses. Not wanting to hear how she would try to paint herself as the perfect stepmother. The one who had done nothing wrong. It's too late for that. I've spent years watching the two of you, and it's clear I don't belong here anymore. I felt my father's eyes on me now, his gaze heavy with guilt. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter that he was finally looking at me. It didn't matter that he was finally hearing me. The truth was we were both too far apart. And no matter how many times he said he was sorry, no matter how many times Ivy smiled and tried to make amends, I couldn't go back to what we had. I turned and walked out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest, but a strange sense of relief filling me at the same time. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how things would change, or if they would change at all. But for the first time in a long time, I knew that I had to stop pretending. I had to stop holding on to a family that wasn't mine anymore. And as I walked back to my room, I couldn't help but breathe in one last time the smell of her hair, the same soap my father used. It lingered in the air, like a reminder that I could never truly be a part of their life again. The days that followed were suffocating in their silence. I couldn't escape the feeling that something had irrevocably changed between us. But I didn't know how to fix it. Every time I passed through the house, the scent of Ivy's hair, the same soap my father used, was like a phantom trailing behind me. It followed me into every room, into every corner of the house. It was always there, lingering like a reminder of everything I couldn't have. The tension had settled into the air like a thick fog. And no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I could feel it pressing in on me. I hadn't confronted them, not really. I had said what I needed to say, but the words hadn't fixed anything. They hadn't made me feel better. In fact, they had only made me feel more disconnected, more invisible. One evening, after dinner, I found myself once again walking through the house. Unsure of where to go, unable to escape the feeling that was suffocating me. Ivy was in the kitchen, humming quietly to herself as she washed the dishes. My father was sitting in his usual spot at the kitchen table, lost in his papers as usual. They seemed like a picture of domestic bliss. But I couldn't escape the feeling that something was horribly wrong. The smell of her hair hit me again as I entered the kitchen. It wasn't just a scent. It was a reminder of everything I didn't have, everything I could never reach. She was wearing that soft, content smile again. The one that told me she had everything under control. That she was the one my father turned to, that she was the one he needed. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood still for a moment, then finally spoke, my voice tight. I can't keep doing this. Ivy froze, her hand still holding the dish, but she didn't turn to face me. She didn't need to. I could feel her attention on me. I could feel her eyes on my back. Her gaze heavy as if she were already preparing for me to say something that would hurt. My father looked up from his papers, but he didn't say anything. It was as if he was waiting for me to explain what I meant. You know, I've spent all these years trying to make this work, I continued. My voice shaking now, trying to fit into this picture you two have created. But it's clear I don't belong here. I never have. The words spilled out faster than I could stop them, fueled by years of frustration. Of being pushed aside, of feeling like I didn't matter. I've been invisible in this house. Ivy, you've replaced me. Everything about you, from the way you move, to the way you smell, to the way you look at him, it's all too much. I can't pretend anymore that this isn't happening. I can't ignore it. I can't ignore you. I could feel the tension in the room shift. Ivy didn't say anything at first, but I could hear her breathing a little heavier now. She set the dish down slowly and turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "That's not what this is," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. But there was something about the way she said it that made me feel small. Like I had no right to feel the way I did. I could feel my anger rising, my chest tight with frustration. "It is what it is. You've made it this way. You've always made it this way. You and him, you've built this perfect life together. And I'm just here. I'm nothing more than a shadow in your world." There was a long pause as she stared at me, her gaze soft but distant. As if I had already lost her. "It's not about replacing you, Hazel," she said quietly. "You're still here. You've always been a part of this family. But you can't hold on to the past forever. Things change. People change." I wanted to scream at her, to tell her she didn't understand, that she would never understand. But I didn't. I just stood there, looking at her, feeling the weight of the words hanging between us. It wasn't just about the smell of her hair or the way my father looked at her. It was about how everything had shifted without me. How they had moved on, leaving me behind in their wake. Finally, my father stood up, his eyes focused on me now. "Hazel," he said, his voice softer than I had expected. "I didn't mean for you to feel like this. I never wanted you to feel invisible. But we're all just trying to find our place in this family." I felt the sting of tears welling up in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I wouldn't let him see me break. Not now. Not when I had already said everything I needed to say. "I've tried, Dad. I've tried to fit in," I whispered. "But I can't anymore. I'm done." With that, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, not waiting for him to stop me. I didn't need to hear their apologies or their explanations. I had already heard enough of them. Upstairs in my room, I closed the door behind me and sank to the floor. I was exhausted. I was so tired of trying to belong to a family that no longer had room for me. The smell of Ivy's hair, like my father's soap, lingered in the back of my mind. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to be part of it anymore. Maybe one day I would figure out where I belonged, but for now, I needed to stop pretending. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had made the right choice. Even if it hurt, even if it meant walking away from everything I thought I knew. The days that followed felt like a slow unraveling. The tension between me and Ivy had only thickened since that night in the kitchen. Every glance, every silence, felt loaded with something I couldn't shake off. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like a stage where everyone had their roles. And I was just a bystander watching the play unfold. Every time I passed through the living room or the kitchen, I could smell it again, the familiar scent of Ivy's hair, the same soap that my father used. It was impossible to ignore, impossible to escape. It lingered in the air, a constant reminder that I was no longer part of the equation. That everything I had known had shifted into something I didn't recognize. I could see them, from across the room or through the hallway, exchanging looks. Speaking softly to each other in a way that felt too intimate, too knowing. They had built this world, this life that I was no longer a part of. And I didn't know how to step back into it. Every time my father smiled at her. Every time Ivy touched his arm or leaned in close to whisper something in his ear. I felt my insides twist with a mixture of anger and helplessness. It was when I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror that I realized how much I had been internalizing it all. The weight of their life together. The constant sense that I didn't belong was starting to show. My eyes were too tired, my skin too pale. I looked like a stranger in my own reflection. I didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't know how to fix the broken pieces. How to restore the connection I once had with my father. The only thing that seemed clear was that I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep pretending to be okay with the way things were. I had tried. For so long, I had tried to be the daughter he wanted. To be the person that would fit in with the perfect little life he had built with Ivy. But it was clear now that no matter how hard I tried, I would always be the outsider. I was just a shadow in their world, and I couldn't keep living like that. I heard the sound of footsteps down the hall, and I instinctively turned away from the mirror, wiping away the stray tears I hadn't realized I'd shed. It was Ivy, her presence so unmistakable. She always moved like she owned the space, like she belonged here more than I did. I wasn't sure what she wanted from me, but I knew I couldn't face her, not now. The door to the bathroom creaked open, and there she was. She looked at me with that soft smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "I thought we should talk," she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. Like she was trying to coax me into some kind of reconciliation. I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit there and listen to her talk about how things were going to be better between us when I knew she didn't truly care. I wasn't sure if she ever had. "I don't have anything to say," I said, my voice steady. But there was a tremor beneath the surface. I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold this all in. "I've said everything I needed to say." She took a step closer, her eyes searching mine as though trying to understand something I wasn't willing to give her. "Hazel, you're my stepdaughter. I care about you. I always have." I couldn't stop the laugh that escaped my lips, though it wasn't born from anything resembling humor. It was bitter, and it tasted like everything I had been holding back for so long. "You don't get it, do you? You never did. You've always cared more about fitting into his world. About making sure you had a place in his life. But you never cared about me. Not really." Her face faltered for a second, but she quickly masked it, her expression shifting into something colder, more guarded. "That's not fair, Hazel. I've tried. I've always tried to make this work. To make you feel welcome." I shook my head, my hands trembling slightly at my sides. You can't make someone feel welcome when they're already invisible. You can't make someone fit into a family they don't belong to. And no matter how many times you say you care, it doesn't change the fact that I'm the one who's been pushed aside. There was a long pause, and I could feel the silence closing in around us. Ivy didn't say anything more. She didn't need to. The truth was already out in the open, and I wasn't sure either of us knew what to do with it. "I'm done pretending," I said softly, looking away from her. "I can't keep living like this." She didn't try to stop me when I walked past her, though I could feel her gaze on my back as I left the bathroom. She had no idea how much it hurt to say those words. How much I wished I didn't feel the way I did. But it was the truth, and sometimes the truth was the only thing left when everything else had fallen apart. I walked into my room, closing the door behind me, and let out a long, shaky breath. The tears I had been holding in finally started to fall, but this time I didn't try to stop them. This time, it was okay to feel the weight of everything. To feel the loss, the pain, the anger. I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't pretending that things could be fixed. That everything could go back to the way it was. Because it couldn't. And I had to face that. I didn't know what the next step would be, or how things would unfold from here. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally stepping into my own life. Maybe it was broken, maybe it was messy, but it was mine. And that had to be enough. And as I lay down on my bed, listening to the quiet, I realized that for the first time, I was finally free. The silence that filled the house after our conversation hung in the air like a thick fog, pressing against my chest with each passing hour. I had expected it, expected that Ivy would retreat into her usual calm, perfect self. But I hadn't expected to feel this empty. I had said the words, told her everything I had been holding back for years. But the aftermath was more suffocating than I anticipated. I spent the next few days avoiding both her and my father. It wasn't intentional, it wasn't like I planned to shut myself in, but every time I entered a room, it felt like the space had already been claimed by them. Ivy's presence was so constant. She was everywhere, as if she had embedded herself into every corner of our house. Every moment, every smell. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape her. The smell of her hair, the way it lingered in the air, always tied to my father's soap, felt like a constant reminder of what they had, and what I would never be a part of. I avoided the kitchen and the living room, only coming downstairs when I absolutely had to. I didn't want to hear their laughter again, didn't want to see the way they moved together, comfortable in their world that had no space for me. I stayed in my room, letting the hours slip by, watching the light outside change as the days turned into weeks. But there was something inside me, something that wouldn't let me stay hidden forever. One night, I found myself standing in the hallway, just outside the kitchen. I had heard the sound of Ivy's voice, gentle and low as she spoke to my father. I don't know why I stopped there, why I couldn't just walk away, but I couldn't help myself. I stood there, pressed against the wall, listening to them. I heard Ivy's soft laugh, that melodic sound that always made my father smile in a way that made me feel like I didn't exist. And then I heard my father's voice, lower and more serious, but still filled with warmth. "You know, Hazel's been distant lately," my father said. "I think she's really struggling with all of this. With you and me. I don't know how to fix it, Ivy. I don't know how to make her see that I'm still here for her." Ivy's voice softened. "She'll come around, Dorian. She's just trying to find her place in all of this. I know it's hard for her. But she's still your daughter. That won't change." There it was. The words I had been waiting to hear, but from the wrong person. She was still trying to make it sound like it was all okay. Like it was just a phase one was going through. Like everything would return to normal if I would just get over it. But I wasn't sure I could get over it. I wasn't sure I could get over her. I pushed away from the wall, my chest tight. The air felt thick with everything unsaid between us. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. I wasn't expecting to hear them talk about me behind my back like I wasn't even there. I wasn't expecting Ivy to speak about me as if I were just another obstacle. Another problem to be solved. I walked into the living room, my feet moving without thinking. My mind still reeling from what I had just overheard. My father looked up when I entered, his eyes a mix of guilt and hope. Ivy was sitting across from him, her smile instantly fading when she saw me. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to confront this. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. Not after what I had just heard. "I heard you," I said, my voice low but steady. "I heard everything." There was a brief pause, then my father stood up, his face troubled. "Hazel, we didn't mean to." "I know you didn't," I interrupted, my voice tinged with bitterness. "But it doesn't change the fact that it's too late. You've already made your choice, and I'm not part of it. I don't fit in anymore. And maybe that's something I've been pretending I can handle, but I can't anymore." Ivy shifted in her seat, her expression unreadable. She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. I'm not asking you to fix it, I continued, my voice growing softer. I'm not asking you to change everything. But don't pretend like I don't see what's happening. Don't pretend like I don't know how things have shifted. I'm not a child anymore, and I'm tired of pretending. My father reached out, his hand hovering in the air as though unsure of how to approach me. Hazel, please. I don't want you to feel like this. I shook my head, stepping back. You don't get it, Dad. You can't fix this with words. You can't fix it with promises. I need to go. I need space to figure this out, to figure myself out. I can't keep living like this, being pushed aside in my own life. Not anymore. I turned to walk away, but my father called after me. Please, Hazel, don't go. We'll work through this together. I paused at the door, my back to them. I could feel Ivy's eyes on me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I had already said everything I needed to say. I'm not coming back, I said softly. Not until I find out who I am without all of this. And with that, I left. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life. I wasn't going to stay in a house where I wasn't wanted. I wasn't going to keep fighting for a place that was never meant for me. I walked out into the night, the cool air biting at my skin, but for the first time, I felt free, and maybe that was all I needed. To let go, to find my own way. The streets felt foreign as I walked down the dimly lit sidewalk. My footsteps echoing in the quiet night. It wasn't just the unfamiliarity of leaving my house, it was the overwhelming sense of being untethered, free yet lost. I hadn't planned this, hadn't known what to do. But something inside me knew that I couldn't stay in that house. Trapped between my father and Ivy, caught in a web of expectations that were never mine to bear. I didn't know where I was headed, but I couldn't stand still either. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts, anger, fear, sadness, and strangely enough, relief. I had left. I had made the choice to walk away from the life that had been suffocating me, and for the first time in ages, I didn't feel completely lost. I felt like I was finally doing something for myself, something that was just mine. I didn't know how long I walked. It didn't matter. I just kept putting one foot in front of the other, as if each step was pulling me farther away from the life I had known. I passed familiar landmarks, places I had walked by countless times, but they felt different now. They were just backdrops to the larger picture I was trying to escape from. I found myself at the Tarnmore Library. Its stone walls bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights. The library had always been a place I turned to when I needed to think. When I needed to be alone with my thoughts. I knew it was late, but I didn't care. I pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The cool air inside the library wrapping around me like an old, familiar blanket. The place was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of pages turning and the distant shuffle of footsteps. I walked past the shelves, not knowing what I was looking for, but knowing that this was where I needed to be. This was the one place where I could think. Where I could breathe without feeling like I was being watched. Without the ever-present weight of Ivy and my father's life pressing down on me. I found a small corner by a window and sank into the worn armchair. The moonlight streamed in, casting long shadows across the wooden floors. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the silence fill me. Trying to quiet the storm inside my head. It didn't work. The anger I felt toward Ivy, toward both of them, still churned beneath the surface. I hated her for taking what was supposed to be mine. For taking the place I used to hold in my father's life. But even more than that, I hated myself for letting it happen. I had stood by, watched, and allowed them to create this perfect little world without me. And now, here I was, alone in a library at night, still not knowing what to do next. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, almost absent-mindedly. I didn't know why I still had it, why I was still carrying it. I wasn't going to call anyone. I wasn't going to call Ivy, or my father. Or anyone who might try to make me feel guilty for leaving. But I couldn't bring myself to turn it off either. I opened the Messages app, scrolling through the names. There was one name that stood out, one name that I hadn't thought of in a while. Lark. She was my closest friend, the one person who had always been there. Who had listened when I couldn't talk to anyone else. We had grown up together, and even though we hadn't spoken much lately, I knew she would understand. I hesitated for a moment, then typed out a message, "I need to talk. Can you meet me?" I hit send before I could second-guess myself, and then leaned back in the chair, trying to steady my breathing. I had done it. I had made the choice. Now I just had to figure out what came next. It didn't take long for the reply to come through. "Where are you?" I smiled softly to myself. Of course, she'd want to know where I was. She was always the one to ground me. To keep me tethered to reality when I felt like I was floating away. "I'm at Tarnmore Library. Meet me here." I knew it wasn't much, but it was enough. Lark would come. She always did when I needed her. I sat there for a while, the minutes ticking by slowly, but they didn't matter. Everything felt different, like I was on the edge of something. On the brink of finally taking control of my own life. The thought terrified me, but it also gave me a sense of peace. I was no longer a spectator in my own world. I was part of it again. I was choosing, even if it meant making mistakes along the way. The door to the library creaked open a while later. And I looked up to see Lark standing in the doorway. Her bright eyes scanning the room before they landed on me. She waved, and a few moments later, she was sitting next to me, the same warm, reassuring smile on her face that I had always trusted. "Well," she said, leaning back in the chair with a deep sigh, "it's been a while." I laughed softly. "Yeah, too long." We sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that only old friends can share without feeling uncomfortable. But the weight of everything I had been carrying started to feel too heavy again, and I knew I couldn't keep it in any longer. "I left," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't stay there anymore. Not with them. Not with Ivy. Lark didn't ask why. She didn't need to. She just reached over, placing a hand on mine in quiet support. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. I nodded, but I could feel the tears building again, threatening to spill over. "I don't know. I feel like I'm losing everything, Lark. I don't know who I am without them." She squeezed my hand, offering me a small, knowing smile. "You're still Hazel. And you're going to figure it out. You're not alone, okay?" And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. It wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't alone anymore. Ivy might have taken a place in my father's life that I could never get back. But I still had myself. And that was enough to begin again. As I sat there in the quiet library, with the moonlight filtering through the windows, I finally felt like I could breathe.